All right. If we've seen that a change in tastes will cause a change in the exchange value of the dollar, let's look at the effects of these changes. What happens, for instance, if inflation in Japan is greater than inflation in the US? In other words, Japanese prices rise relative to US prices. What will happen to the exchange value of the dollar? Here we're looking make sure you set up these graphs right. We're looking at the foreign exchange value of the dollar, and we start out with some demand for dollars and some supply of dollars. Therefore, an original exchange value of the dollar. Well, if Japanese inflation is greater than American inflation, then Americans will, all other things being equal, be less interested in Japanese goods, and they will therefore supply fewer dollars in the foreign exchange market, causing an increase in the exchange value of the dollar. And you can do it in your head. If you looked at the market for yen, what would shift? In the market for yen, Japanese consumers would want more American goods and services because the more rapid inflation in Japan makes American goods and services look relatively cheaper. So in the foreign exchange market for yen, there'd be an increase in the demand for, there would be an increase in the supply of yen because Japanese people would want to sell more yen to get dollars, and that would drive the value of the yen downward. So that makes sense. There'll be a stronger dollar and a weaker yen if inflation in Japan is greater than inflation in the US. Let's take another case. What if we're talking about relative changes in Q? What will happen to the exchange value of the dollar if there's a boom or a recession in Japan? So let's look at this one. Let's say there's a boom in Japan. And once again, we're looking at the market for dollars. Well, the rule of thumb to keep in mind, just a handy way to remember it, is that any boom sucks in imports. A fancy way of saying that the marginal propensity to import is greater than zero, or maybe that's the fancy way to say it. In any case, a booming economy, as Japanese people become richer, all other things being equal, they will spend more, and part of what they spend will be on imports, and therefore they will need more dollars, and therefore the demand for dollars in the foreign exchange market will rise. So a boom in Japan will increase the exchange value of the dollar or lead to a stronger dollar. And if you want to check this, you could think about the market for yen. Japanese will supply more yen, pushing the value of the yen down in the foreign exchange market for yen. Finally, let's look at the interest rate effect. And to think about the interest rate effect, we're thinking now about the demand for financial assets. Bonds, you could think of, savings accounts. When interest rates change, the demand for foreign financial assets changes. All other things being equal, what will happen if the interest rate rises in Japan? Let's see. So now we're looking here. If interest rates, this is relative to the US, of course. If interest rates rise in Japan and they rise in the US by the same amount, it'll be a wash. But if the interest rate in Japan rises relative to the US interest rate, what will happen in the foreign exchange market for dollars? Well, what will happen? The supply of dollars depends on Japanese sorry. Let's cut that. Let's think about the supply of dollars depends on Americans who want Japanese goods and services and assets. And here we're going to concentrate on financial assets, such as Japanese bonds. What's going to happen to the number of Americans who want to sell their dollars and get yen when Japanese interest rates rise? Well, an increase in Japanese interest rates will increase the supply of dollars because more Americans will want to swap their dollars in the foreign exchange market and get some yen so that they can buy some of those Japanese bonds. Because to buy a Japanese bond, like buying a Japanese car, you need yen. So the effect will be of this rise in Japanese interest rates will be an increase in the supply of dollars and therefore a fall in the exchange value of the dollar. And once again, you can run it backwards in your head. If you think of the foreign exchange market for yen, an increase in Japanese interest rates would shift the demand for yen because more Americans will want to buy yen. So in the foreign exchange market for yen, the demand curve will shift to the right, producing a stronger yen. Stronger yen, weaker dollar, same result. Give whatever one you were asked for. If you're asked to show the effect of an increase in Japanese interest rates on the foreign exchange value of the dollar, draw this graph. if you're asked to show the effect of an increase in Japanese interest rates on the exchange value of the yen, draw the foreign exchange market for yen.